Before we talk about Kevin, I need you to imagine a man standing at the edge of a rooftop, not to jump, but because sometimes the edge is the only place you can see the whole picture. Kevin wasn't suicidal. No, it wasn't that kind of rooftop moment. He wasn't about to leap. He was just lost. Not broken. Not beaten. But lost like a man holding a map of a city that doesn't exist anymore. It was a Tuesday, which felt like the most forgettable day to have your whole life crumbling beneath your feet. He was 35. Lived in a one-bedroom shoebox above a laundromat that rattled like a migraine when the dryers were running. He'd just been laid off from a job that didn't even respect him enough to fire him face to face. An email. No severance. Just a thanks for everything. Good luck. His fridge was empty. His bank account was emptier. And worst of all, he hadn't spoken to his family in over a year, not since the fight at Christmas that turned into the silence of spring, then summer, then another cold, bitter winter. Kevin didn't do drugs. He didn't drink to blackout. He didn't even go out anymore. He just existed like the background noise in someone else's life. Now, on that Tuesday, he found himself on the rooftop not to escape, but because he couldn't stand the walls of that apartment closing in on him anymore. He wanted wind. He wanted sky. He wanted something to remind him he was still breathing. And that's when it happened. A sound clear as glass shattering pierced the air behind him. Not a scream. Not a gunshot. Something different. A kind of electric crackle. He turned, slowly, expecting to see a pigeon caught in a power line or maybe one of the junkies from the alley messing around with some sketchy rig. Instead, he saw her. A woman in a silver coat standing where no door should have opened. No elevator, no stairs. Just standing there like the rooftop had summoned her. And she smiled like she knew him. "I've been looking for you, Kevin." He blinked. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "No," she said, stepping forward. "But I know what you could be." "Now hold up, because I know how that sounds. Like science fiction. Like something out of a conspiracy podcast or late-night fever dream. But I promise you, this isn't that kind of story. It's real. As real as the scars Kevin carried on the inside. That moment right there on the rooftop, that was the crack in his life where the light got in. And nothing, not one damn thing, would ever be the same after it. It had been 3 days since Kevin lost his job. Not a word from his old coworkers. "No, we'll miss you. No, let's grab coffee." Not even a pity text. Just silence. He hadn't told anyone in his life. What was he supposed to say? "Hey, guess who's officially unemployed and eating ramen for breakfast?" It didn't exactly scream share-worthy moment. His apartment stank of takeout containers and sweat. He'd stopped caring about laundry. His blinds were half shut and twisted at the bottom like someone had been peeking out but never fixed them. The TV buzzed in the background, a crime doc playing on loop, and Kevin wasn't even watching. Just letting it fill the room so he didn't have to hear his own breathing. He'd applied for 12 jobs already. All auto declines. It felt like the algorithm had already blacklisted him. And then it happened. Just before midnight. His phone buzzed. He didn't even look at it at first. Probably spam. But it buzzed again. And again. Curious, he picked it up. It was a group message. Random numbers, unknown names. Someone must have typed his number in wrong and added him to a group chat. But then he saw it. A picture. A man, mid-40s maybe, standing on a stage with a mic, sweat dripping down his face, eyes red like he'd just been crying. The caption read, "3 years sober today. Thank you for never giving up on me." The texts that followed were a flood of love. "Proud of you, brother. You saved your own life. I remember day one. Look at you now." Kevin just stared at the screen. He didn't know these people. But something about the moment, the rawness, the honesty grabbed him by the collar. He hadn't cried in 2 years. Not since his mom passed. But sitting there, in that stale, dim room, he cracked. Just quietly. A few tears, maybe a muffled sob. That was it. But it felt like letting air out of a balloon that had been stretching too long. He didn't respond. Didn't say anything. Just left the group silently. But that image, the man on the mic, stuck with him. The next day, Kevin opened his laptop and started typing, not job applications, not a cover letter. A journal entry. April 19th, "I'm not okay. But maybe I'm not done yet either." That message, the one not meant for him, it wasn't magic. But it was enough. Enough to get him out of bed. Enough to make him take a walk. Enough to stop scrolling and start writing. He didn't know it yet. But that message from a stranger was about to become the crack in his life where the light got in. The journal entry sat open on his laptop like a fragile secret. It wasn't profound. It wasn't poetic. But it was his. April 19th. "I'm not okay. But maybe I'm not done yet either." He read it again the next morning just to prove to himself he really wrote it. And something about seeing those words, simple as they were, felt like planting a flag on a tiny island in a sea of nothing. A moment to claim, I'm still here. Kevin didn't shower, didn't even change clothes, but he put on his scuffed sneakers and decided to go for a walk. At first it was just to get air. Nothing noble about it. He wasn't reclaiming his life. He wasn't taking the first step. Nah, he just needed to move or he'd go crazy. But the moment he stepped outside, the sun hit different. It wasn't brighter. It wasn't warmer. But it felt new, like he hadn't really seen it in a while. And suddenly he noticed things he never paid attention to before. The sound of kids laughing down the block. The smell of someone grilling in the distance. A man sitting on his stoop talking to his dog like it was a roommate. Life. Real, messy, human life. Kevin didn't even realize how far he'd gone until he passed a storefront he didn't recognize. A little community center, tucked between a bodega and a pawn shop. A handwritten sign on the window read, Wednesday night open mic. All stories welcome. No judgment. No pressure. He laughed. Out loud. Like what were the odds? The word story tugged at something inside him. Not because he was a writer. He wasn't. But because he had one. Everyone does. And for the first time in a long time, he wondered if his was still unfolding. He didn't go inside. Just stared for a bit. Then walked home. But later that night, after another bowl of sad, salty ramen, he found himself back on that journal. And this time the words poured out. Not neat. Not pretty. Just honest. He wrote about the layoff. The silence. The pizza box mountain in his kitchen. The message that wasn't meant for him. He wrote like someone who wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. And at the end of the entry, he wrote something he hadn't dared to believe in for a while. Maybe I'll go next Wednesday. Just to listen. Just to be around people again. It was a maybe, but it was the most powerful word in his world right then. Maybe meant the door was cracked. And that's all it takes sometimes. The following Wednesday, Kevin didn't chicken out. He almost did. He stood in front of his bathroom mirror for a solid 10 minutes, arguing with himself like a lawyer trying to convince a jury of one. You don't know anyone there. It's just a bunch of weirdos. You'll stand out. They'll know you're broken. But then he looked himself in the eye, really looked, and thought, who cares? For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like pretending. So he put on a clean-ish shirt, the one that didn't have a stain on the sleeve, grabbed a notebook, and walked back to that little community center. It was already dark outside, and the city had that usual midweek buzz. Cars honking, laughter from a bar down the block, the occasional siren cutting through the night like a thread unraveling. The center wasn't fancy. Fluorescent lights, mismatched chairs, a folding table with instant coffee and store-brand cookies. But there was something about the energy in the room. Soft, buzzing, alive. About 20 people were scattered around the space, some in tight little knots of conversation, others sitting quietly like him. No stage, no mic stand, just a small circle of chairs in the center of the room, and a sign taped to the wall that read, You're not here to impress. You're here to release. Kevin took a seat in the back. The host, a woman named Grace with faded tattoos and kind eyes, kicked things off with a simple rule. No fixing, no judging, just stories. Yours or someone else's. If you feel moved to speak, speak. If you don't, just be here. The first person to share was a man in his 60s who talked about losing his wife and learning how to cook for one. The next, a teenager who confessed he felt like a ghost at his own school. Then a woman in scrubs who whispered her fear of going home to an empty apartment every night after 12-hour shifts. Kevin just listened, and it was like water to a man who'd been thirsty for years. There was no applause, no feedback, just quiet nods, tears, the occasional chuckle, and always presence. About halfway through, Kevin realized he was gripping his notebook like it was life support. He hadn't planned on sharing. But when the circle opened again, something inside him stood up before he did. He walked to the middle. His hands were shaking. His heart beat like a drum. I didn't think I'd come tonight, he began, voice raw. And I sure as hell didn't think I'd talk. But I saw this place last week and something in me said go. He took a breath. I lost my job. Haven't talked to my family in over a year. I eat dinner standing up at my sink most nights. And a few days ago, I got a text that wasn't even meant for me, but it saved me anyway. The room was still. I guess I wanted to say it out loud. That I'm here, and I'm tired of pretending I'm not. He didn't cry, but his voice cracked just enough to let everyone know he meant every word. Grace looked at him with that same calm, tattooed grace she started the night with and simply said, "Thank you for being here, Kevin." No one clapped. No one fixed. But when he sat back down, someone quietly slid a note into his notebook. 2 words written in shaky ink. Me too. And just like that, Kevin realized he wasn't as alone as he thought. Kevin walked home that night without his earbuds in. No music. No podcast. Just the city, the hum of traffic, the uneven rhythm of his footsteps, the rustle of a breeze cutting through the buildings like it had somewhere urgent to be. And for the first time in months, maybe years, he didn't feel numb. He didn't feel fixed either. Let's not pretend. Life didn't suddenly bloom into Technicolor. But there was something. A shift. Like the needle on a compass quietly twitching toward true north. The next morning, Kevin woke up before his alarm. Not out of anxiety. Not because of noise. Just awake. Rested. He made real breakfast for the first time in a long while. Toast. Eggs. A little too much salt, but who cares? He didn't scroll through job listings right away. He didn't open his inbox like it was a war zone. Instead, he opened his journal. And wrote. I said it out loud last night. I told a room full of strangers that I'm tired of pretending. And no one laughed. No one ran. They just listened. Maybe that's enough for today. Then something happened that surprised even him. He picked up the phone. Not to order food. Not to call customer service. But to text his sister. He hadn't spoken to her since the blow-up Christmas 2 years ago. He'd said things. She'd said worse. And then silence became the default. His thumbs hovered over the screen for what felt like an hour. Finally, he typed. Hey. I know it's been a long time. Just wanted to say I'm thinking about you. Hope you're okay. No apology. No expectations. Just a message. Just a crack in the ice. He didn't hear back right away. That was okay. Later that day, Kevin went back to the community center not for the open mic. Just to help. He asked Grace if they needed anything. She smiled like she'd been waiting for that question for weeks. Turns out they needed someone to sort supplies for a weekend food drive. Nothing glamorous. Just lifting boxes, organizing shelves, brewing terrible coffee for volunteers. He stayed 4 hours. And when he left, Grace patted his shoulder and said, "You're good at showing up." That's a rare skill. He didn't know how to take a compliment. Not yet. But that one landed somewhere deep. That night, Kevin sat on his couch with the lights off, the window cracked, the cool night air drifting in. He wasn't thinking about bills. Or rejection emails. Or what his life should look like. He was just thinking about next Wednesday. And how maybe, just maybe, he had something worth sharing again. The next Wednesday, Kevin got there early. Too early if he was being honest. Grace was still setting up chairs, humming something bluesy and half out of tune. Kevin offered to help without saying a word, just started unfolding chairs and wiping down the coffee table like he worked there. "Look at you," Grace said, playfully bumping him with her elbow. "A regular." Kevin shrugged, but yeah, it felt kind of good. The night started slow. A few new faces. A few familiar ones. People shared. Some raw, some funny. One woman read a letter to her teenage self and made 3 grown men tear up, Kevin included. Then, halfway through the night, it happened. The door opened. And in walked Kevin's past. He didn't recognize the guy at first. Shorter than he remembered. Hair buzzed. Hoodie pulled up. But then their eyes met. And something inside Kevin just stopped. It was Mark. His old best friend. The one who'd been like a brother. The one he hadn't spoken to since the fallout. Years ago, they'd started a business together, some freelance digital marketing hustle that almost worked. But when money got tight and stress cracked the foundation, things fell apart. Words were exchanged. Accusations. Pride slammed every door shut. And now here he was. Sitting across the circle like a ghost who got bored of haunting and decided to show up in the flesh. Mark didn't notice him at first. But when Kevin spoke, because yeah, he did decide to speak that night, it all came rushing back. "I've been learning something lately," Kevin began, voice steady but lower than usual. "That healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's just showing up. Being in a room where no one's trying to fix you. Just letting you be." Mark's eyes found him mid-sentence. And for a moment, the air changed. Not tense. Just loaded. Kevin finished his piece. Short, honest, unfinished like his life, and sat down. He didn't look at Mark again. Not until the circle ended, and people began gathering their things. Then he felt a tap on his shoulder. "Kev," Mark said. One word, but heavy. Kevin turned. His stomach flipped. "Hey!" Neither of them moved. "I almost walked out when I saw you," Mark admitted. "Didn't know if I had the right." Kevin laughed softly, more out of disbelief than humor. "Yeah, I almost didn't come back here tonight. Guess we're both stubborn." They stood there in silence for a few long seconds. Then Mark held out his hand. "I'm sorry. For everything." Kevin stared at it. That hand had once thrown a punch in an argument. Had once helped him build a business from scratch. Had once been the only thing keeping him from falling apart after his mom's funeral. He shook it. "Me too," Kevin said. That handshake didn't erase the past. But it acknowledged it. And that was enough for now. They didn't make big promises. Didn't plan to grab a drink or rebuild overnight. But they stood in that room, shoulder to shoulder, like two men finally tired of pretending they were fine without each other. 2 weeks had passed since Kevin saw Mark at the center. They hadn't talked much since. Just a couple of texts. Short, careful, like two people trying to see if the bridge between them could hold weight again. But still, they were talking. That was more than Kevin thought possible. He was sitting at the coffee shop around the corner from his apartment. Same spot he used to job hunt, back when he was just throwing resumes into the void. Only now, he had his journal open and a black coffee that was strong enough to wake the dead. Then his phone buzzed. One notification. From Emily, sis. He froze. He didn't even open it at first. Just stared at the name like it might disappear if he blinked. He hadn't heard from her since he sent that message weeks ago. The one he told himself not to expect an answer to. The one that had lived in the silence ever since. He tapped the screen. "Hey, I didn't know what to say. Still kinda don't. But I'm glad you reached out. I've missed you. We've both been stubborn. Doesn't mean I stopped caring." Kevin exhaled so hard he startled the woman at the next table. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. What do you even say to something like that? "Sorry? I miss you too? Can we rewind 5 years?" He settled on the only thing that felt real. "I've missed you too. I'm not great at this, but I'm trying. Would love to talk. No pressure. Just when you're ready." He hit send, and just stared at the screen like it might sprout wings. 5 minutes later. "I'm free Sunday. Brunch." Brunch. The most casual word in the world. But in Kevin's heart, it hit like a bomb. Not because of the meal. Because of what it meant. She was willing. He sat there in the cafe, hand over his mouth, just absorbing the moment. No fireworks. No dramatic music. Just the quiet cracking of a wall that had stood for too long. He closed his journal, folded his arms over it, and smiled. Something was changing. And not just around him, in him. The fear that used to drive everything. The shame. The voice that said you're too far gone. No one wants to hear your story. Just disappear? It wasn't gone. But it wasn't driving anymore. Now, something else was behind the wheel. Something that looked a little like hope. And a lot like life. Sunday came with a nervous energy that Kevin hadn't felt since his first job interview in college. He stood in front of his mirror longer than usual, trying on 2 shirts that were basically identical, just different shades of trying but not trying. He didn't want to overdress. It was brunch, not a peace summit. But he also didn't want to look like he just crawled out of his apartment after 3 years in the wilderness. By the time he walked into the little cafe Emily picked, Maggie's place, a cozy spot with yellow booths and too many succulents on every windowsill, his hands were sweating. She was already there. Kevin almost didn't recognize her at first. Not because she looked different, but because he hadn't seen her this version in so long. Hair pulled back, soft sweater, eyes tired but kind, like life had worn on her too, but hadn't hardened her. "Hey," she said, standing just enough to offer that awkward half-hug. "Hey," Kevin echoed. "You look well." She smiled. Better than last time you saw me screaming across a Christmas ham? Kevin laughed, sharp and sudden. Yeah, just slightly better. The first 10 minutes were tight. Stiff. Spoons clinking in coffee cups. Nervous sips. Small talk about nothing, weather, work. She was still at the firm, a neighbor's dog who barked through the night like it was his job. Then, somewhere between the second cup of coffee and the pancakes arriving, it shifted. Emily looked at him. Not past him. At him. Kev, she said, I don't want to dance around it. We both messed up. But I need you to know. I never stopped wondering how you were. I was just too damn angry and proud to reach out. Kevin nodded slowly. Yeah. Me too. I think I was more ashamed than angry. I didn't like who I'd become, and I figured if you saw it, you'd just confirm it. She shook her head. You never needed to be perfect. You just needed to show up. That line hit him like a freight train. That's what Grace said. That's what the open mic was about. That's what he'd been doing, slowly, clumsily, ever since. Just showing up. They talked for an hour. Then, too. Nothing dramatic. No sudden tears or over-the-table apologies. Just two people sitting across from each other, trying to rebuild something brick by brick. Before they left, Emily reached into her bag and pulled out a small photo. It was from when they were kids, maybe 7 and 9, covered in mud after some backyard adventure, both smiling like the world had no corners. Found it last week, she said. Thought you might want it. Kevin took it, hands trembling just a little. And for the first time in years, he saw himself before the disappointments. Before the shame. Before the silence. He saw the kid who used to dream. As they stepped outside, Emily looked at him sideways and said, Don't disappear again, Kev. I won't, he said. And for the first time in a long time, he meant it. The week after brunch, Kevin walked differently. Not like he owned the world, but like he belonged in it again. Like his feet had remembered they had a destination. He started volunteering twice a week at the center. Grace gave him more responsibility without even asking, just started tossing him tasks, trusting him with keys, calling him part of the backbone of the space. That meant more to him than most titles he'd had in his adult life. He even landed a couple freelance gigs, nothing huge, just enough to cover rent and groceries without panic attacks. A local nonprofit needed help with their online presence. Word got around that Kevin, the quiet guy who listens, was also really good with words and graphics. Then came the call. It was a Thursday. Raining. The kind of soft, steady rain that makes the city feel like it's whispering. Kevin was eating leftover stir-fry in his apartment, half watching an old movie when his phone rang. Number, unknown. He almost didn't answer. But something in him said, pick up. Hello? A pause. Then, Kevin. It's me. Mark. His stomach clenched, instinctively bracing for something bad. It had only been a few weeks since that open mic handshake. They hadn't spoken since, and this call wasn't part of the slow, careful rebuild. Hey, man. Everything okay? No, Mark said, voice flat. Not really. But I didn't know who else to call. Kevin sat up. What's going on? Mark let out a long breath. It's my brother, Jay. He's been in recovery clean for almost a year. But he relapsed 2 nights ago. Bad. We found him yesterday. He's stable now, but he's not talking to anyone. Kevin swallowed. I'm sorry, man. That's rough. Yeah, but he used to come to your community center. You didn't know him. He kept to himself. But I remember he mentioned it. Said it was the only place he didn't feel judged. I thought maybe if I brought him back there, if you were there, maybe he'd open up. Maybe it'd help. Kevin blinked, the weight of it hitting hard. You want me to talk to him? I don't know. I'm just trying to stop him from disappearing. Kevin nodded, heart pounding. All right. Yeah. Bring him by. That night, Kevin stayed late at the center. Cleaned the tables even though they were already clean. Made a fresh pot of coffee. Paged through his journal but didn't write. At 8:17 p.m. the door opened. Mark walked in, looking like a man carrying bricks in his chest. Behind him, a younger guy, maybe early 20s, with hollow eyes and a twitch in his hands. Jay. He didn't make eye contact. Just sat down in the far corner. Mark nodded at Kevin. He knows who you are. He just doesn't know if he's ready. Kevin walked over slowly. Sat down in the chair next to him, leaving one empty space between them. He didn't say, hey, I'm here to help. He didn't say, you're going to be fine. He just said, I used to sit in that same chair. Thought nobody saw me. Jay glanced at him. Kevin smiled gently. Turns out they did. And they didn't walk away. Jay didn't speak. But his shoulders loosened. Just a little. Sometimes that's how healing starts. Not with a grand gesture. But with a chair. and someone who refuses to leave the empty space between you. The next open mic night was packed. Word had spread about the space, about the people, about the way it felt like church without the guilt. A place where you didn't have to pretend to be okay, where stories were currency and silence was sacred. Kevin hadn't planned to speak that night. He told Grace he was just going to help with chairs and coffee and stand in the back like usual. But she gave him that look. The kind that says, "You're lying to yourself, but it's okay. I'm patient." The room filled fast. Jay showed up again. Still quiet, still haunted. But this time he nodded when Kevin passed him. A silent thanks with no words. That nod meant everything. Halfway through, Grace stepped to the center and said, "Before we close, I think there's someone here who's got a story he's finally ready to share, front to back." Then she looked at Kevin. The room turned. He froze, his heart beating out of his chest, palms sweaty, breath shallow. But he stood up anyway, because the version of himself from 6 months ago, he wouldn't have, and he didn't owe that version anything. Kevin walked to the center of the circle and looked around. Familiar faces, new ones, some crying, some smiling, all waiting. And then he spoke. "My name's Kevin, and this is the first time in my life I felt like I'm not just surviving." Silence. "I used to wake up and wonder if I mattered, if anyone would notice if I just disappeared. I lost a job I hated, stopped talking to the people I loved, and convinced myself I was broken beyond repair. I thought staying quiet was safer." He paused, voice steady now. "But then one night, I got a text that wasn't meant for me. Just some stranger celebrating a win in a group I didn't belong to. And that message cracked something open." He looked at Grace, then at Jay, then at the back of the room, where Emily stood, arms folded, eyes glassy with pride. "I showed up here, not expecting anything, just needing to hear people speak their truth so I could remember mine. And over time, something wild happened." He smiled. "I started healing, not because someone fixed me, not because life got easier, but because you let me be seen as I was. No masks, no edits." He took a breath. "So here's my truth. I'm still figuring it out. I still get scared. I still have days where the darkness tries to pull me back. But now, I speak. I reach out. I choose presence over perfection." He looked around one more time. "And if you're sitting in that chair tonight thinking no one sees me, just know we do. I do. You're not alone. You never were. No applause. Just the quiet kind of stillness that only happens when a room breathes the same breath." When Kevin sat down, he didn't feel lighter. He felt real. He felt like a man who had come back to life in slow motion and finally stepped all the way in. That's Kevin's story. Not because it's finished. Nah. He's still going. Still waking up every day trying to be a little more himself. But because one moment changed everything. Not a miracle. Not magic. Just a message that wasn't meant for him, and a decision to show up anyway. And sometimes that's all it takes. One choice, one story, one beginning. You feel that? Yeah. Now it's your turn.